but then wouldn't work for 21 months. Landlords decided to replace entire functional, if you discount the oven, kitchen with a second-hand one that didn't really fit the space. Hubby was working night shift and sleeping during the day while a builder worked, and landlords helped. They made no effort to section the kitchen off from the rest of the house during this. So each night when I came home, I had to vacuum, sweep, dust, and mop as best I could amongst boxes of kitchen stuff stacked wherever it would fit in the house. Fed my poor kids crap takeaway 4 days in a row. They also left the back door and front door open at the same time, and one of my dogs decided to take himself for a jaunt around the neighborhood. Got picked up by the ranger, $760 in fines, and bailed to bust him out of the pound. Not even an apology, let alone waiving my rent for 2 weeks to make up for the expense. We had already replaced the fence down one side of the yard to ensure the dogs were safely contained out of our own pockets about 12 months prior to. Hubby completely lost his shit and threw the landlords out of the house the day he was woken up by the sound of a grinder and dust pouring through the door jamb of our bedroom. Went out to the kitchen to find the builder had gone to lunch, and the landlord had decided he could save some money by reusing the splashback tiles. That's fine. We already knew they were tight asses. What wasn't fine was he had taken the tiles off and revealed an expensive wall underneath an apps right-of-way that was in both them that fills an able to be Blake site to these shacks. The test fans, we already knew they were tight asses. What wasn't fine was he had taken the tiles off and revealed an asbestos wall and nurse to call it very well break imprints the fence, regrouping and fixing architraves and kickbacks, plugging up big holes inside the cupboards, etc., because the landlords went overseas for 5 weeks and hadn't paid the builder what he was owed. 2 months later, we had a house inspection and were served with a notice of rent increase by 25% due to the improved kitchen facilities. Didn't matter, the shower base was leaking, and they refused to let my plumber install a new thermostat on the heater. Either ran flat out or off. But we'd lived there for 8 years and would have paid it just to skip the inconvenience of moving again. I made the mistake of telling the real estate agent about the asbestos debacles and having a bit of a sulk about the extra expenses we had already worn because of their tight-fisted ways. That notice was promptly followed a week later by an eviction notice. We moved 4 days before Christmas. Cleaned out our very meager savings, so no tree, no decorations, and no presents for our 2 kids until about a month later when we could afford it. Worst landlords ever. Nearly 2 years later, and I still rage to think about it. It was this bearded British dude who always wore hideous knitted sweaters. He was nice enough if you ignored the fact that he was a total pervert. He lived in an apartment in the building next door and kept the debit credit machine on a spot on his desk that you had to lean over to reach, and as a result, your boobs would dangle as close to his face as possible. The girls in my building would all go pay rent together because no one wanted to be alone with him. He was very touchy and would creep up and tickle you. It wasn't uncommon to wake up and find him in your room. All of the units were just one room, inspecting something. We'd find him asleep on the couch in the front hall and stuff, and the people who lived in his building said he'd sometimes take baths in other people's bathrooms. The building was lived in mainly by people who didn't plan on staying for long, so it was part of the rental agreement that you couldn't live there for more than a year, but it was common knowledge that if you were a girl who approached him while wearing something slutty, you could get an extension. I really liked the place despite him, so I used that method and got 14 months. One girl purposely answered the door to him in her underwear and got 16 months. My last landlord either has undiagnosed dementia or paranoid schizophrenia. She would constantly come down to our apartment, she was upstairs, and explain to me that she needed my help with something like changing her security code on this or that because someone was breaking into the house and stealing her documents. She was constantly calling me at work or emailing me about something new every other day. I got just so installed because her Wi-Fi wouldn't reach, and she told me to tech sabotage her power outlets, which I told her didn't work a week before, because they were a competitor of her cable provider. She brought me upstairs once to ask me if a pair of kids' swimming goggles belonged to me. I told her no, and she went on to explain that people are breaking into the house and trying to scare her, and this was one of their messages. She also dropped a basketball net on my car, gave my dog human medicine, he's fine, and left our sink leaking for 2 of 4 months. I stayed there. Oh, and when she finally got the sink repaired, she asked me to check her belongings because the guy was a crook and charged her for work he didn't do. It was like living in a madhouse. I dreaded coming home every day. On the day we left, she called the cops because apparently during the 15 minutes we were gone to get the U-Haul, someone broke into the house for more documents. I'm a landlord, and as awful as having a bad landlord is having a nightmare tenant, it's just as bad, if not worse, in many cases. I've rented before. One landlord rented me an apartment without having cleaned anything. I did it myself. If anything needed repaired, it took forever, and the guy sent was inept. Yeah, that's all annoying, but pales in comparison to the horror of being a landlord in some cases. Here's an example of what it can be like to be a landlord. I'm currently in the process of evicting someone for destruction of private property, criminal trespassing, breaking every part of the lease agreement, and theft. House has spray paint all over it. The yard is completely destroyed. I guess turning the backyard into an open fire pit sounded like a good idea. There are holes in the walls that certainly weren't there before. The fence around the house is destroyed. A hideous and poorly constructed shed was put up in the yard from plywood, and it's already deteriorating after only being there a few months. I'll have to take that to the landfill myself. They never checked to see if building the thing was okay. They moved a camper into the backyard and allowed a homeless person to live in it. That does not bother me so much because I am all for helping the homeless, but they are doing it just so they can take his food stamps. They recently had this very young kid move in just so they could charge him $800 a month for a single downstairs room. I charged them $425 totalers to them whole property, excluding a detached garage on the property, and put their own lock on it, but only after first stealing some things. It is perfectly legal in my state to only lease certain buildings on a property, and they were very aware that this was part of the agreement. The man sells drugs too, yay. This all goes without mentioning that there is now a bed bug infestation. That's a problem I've never had to deal with before. All told, I'm probably going to spend several thousand just to repair the problems of the house. And that doesn't include all these lawyer fees and court costs that I'm likely to be met with in the next month. So all you tenants who think a relatively scummy landlord is annoying, think about if you own the property some riffraff was destroying. That's only one of my properties. I'm starting another eviction process soon on another rental, and the story there is different but equally as stressful. I wish people could just be respectful and not break every law in the book. Crazy cat lady without cats describes her best. I rented the first floor apartment in her house. The doorbells and mailboxes were behind a large metal gate on the driveway to the garage, and it was always locked. People could not ring and mail could not get delivered. I got a cheap doorbell from Amazon and thought that would solve it. Landlady secretly stole the battery from it at night and told me the mailman probably did it. The mailman was more annoyed than anyone that he couldn't reach the mailbox or get anyone to open the gate. He yelled to me from the parking lot if he had mail for me. After 2 months and me starting to look for a new place, landlady informed me she had gone through her notes of who visited me, when, and how long people stayed, and it was too hectic for her to keep track. I was the only tenant and usually away for work all day. My only visitors were there on weekends. Due to that, she had installed a security camera right outside my door. She also went through my trash, and if a glass had accidentally found its way into the regular kitchen trash, it would stand on my stairs, filthy as it was, with a note to please put glass in the container across the street. After 3 months, I left in a hurry and moved to a place a few streets away. The landlord here was 1,000 years old, nearly blind, according to himself, and he fancied himself a handyman. He repaired a leaking bathroom sink after breaking into my apartment by removing all pipes in the bathroom and leaving it like that for 3 days. To get spare parts, the bathroom was underwater and the water to the kitchen had been turned off. After that, I changed the locks and asked him to not repair things that were not broken, and waited for me to come home if he needed to check something. The only reason I had caught him in the bathroom mess was someone giving me a ride home from work, so I arrived 30 minutes earlier than usual. Landlord openly admitted he thought I wouldn't be home that early. After this little fallout, I never caught him in my apartment again, but 2 weeks later he replaced all locks in the house, including mine. Having access again, he moved furniture around, usually for access to radiators, pipes, and other things to repair when I wasn't at home. I kept locking doors in the apartment, except living room and kitchen, just to find insane amounts of huge, slow flies in there, like hundreds. Called pest control, they could not find the source. I found it a few months after moving out. Landlord in a sports fishing store, buying baits, smiling at me like Hannibal Lecter. My boyfriend's parents own the place we live in, and while yes, it is great that they helped us out with a place to stay, sometimes the stress his mother puts on us is really hard to deal with. Boyfriend's mom is paranoid schizophrenic, and she directs her paranoia at us very, very frequently. I dread coming home from work because on several occasions we have come home to her waiting outside for us. She will sometimes crack open her front door when we pull up and watch us through the crack. She is also notorious for standing outside and trying to hear what we talk about through the walls, because she is convinced that all we do is talk about her. On several occasions, we have come home to her waiting outside for us. She will sometimes crack open her front door when we pull up and watch us through the crack. She is also notorious for standing outside and trying to hear what we talk about through the walls, because she is convinced that all we do is talk about her. On several occasions, we have come home to her waiting outside for us. She will sometimes crack open her front door when we pull up and watch us through the crack. She is also notorious for standing outside and trying to hear what we talk about through the walls, because she is convinced that all we do is talk about her. On several occasions, we have come home to obvious signs that she has been in the house. Once, our bedroom ceiling fan had been replaced with a normal light fixture, apparently by magic. On another occasion, I had told her that my cat had an adverse reaction to spray-on flea medicine. We came home to find half of his body covered in the spray. When confronted about this, she claimed that he must have fallen in some. Once came home kitchen cabinets open with everything pulled out because she was convinced I was lying about not having a filter for her air conditioner. She once kidnapped my dog and had him in her home while we were outside calling for him. I was convinced she had taken him off somewhere because she has done this with several of my boyfriend's cats throughout the years. We went to her house to ask her if she had seen him, and she claimed she hadn't, then went into her bedroom. A few minutes later, she opened the door and my dog ran out, covered in water. She acted surprised to see him come out of her room, then later admitted she had been trying to get her new, tiny female dog pregnant. She constantly tries to pit my boyfriend's brother, his girlfriend, and me against each other. She will come over and talk for hours about things that my boyfriend's brother has done that really are insignificant. She is a master manipulator, and even though I know what she is doing, it still sometimes takes a good bit of effort to shrug off what she says.